Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another humid subtropical edition of the Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Thank you so much for being back for the Gold Standard for episode 2 of what will be a 3-part series of meeting the Gold Standard team. Last week, or I guess this is last week, I don't know how we're going to release these episodes, we had our webmaster for the goldstandardpodcast.com, Robert Nellinger. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we did. Rob's an old friend of mine. This week, I'm actually going to be interviewing our guest, which is the producer of the Gold Standard podcast, Blake Osborne. Blake Osborne, the owner of Osborne Studio and Sound in beautiful Columbia, Tennessee. But it was only beautiful Columbia, Tennessee in episode 1.
It was only beautiful in episode 1.
After that, we just disappeared.
Then it just became, well, where we're at.
Yeah,
no big deal. You know where we're at. No big deal. So
you know what I forgot?
What did you forget?
Facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley.
Sure.
Twitter is @Alan M. Mosley. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to do any of that.
No, you don't.
Because you can just go to thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
They really should go to osbornestudioandsound.com, I think.
osbornestudioandsound.com. That is my web address. That's right. If you want to see really old pictures of this place from a long time ago.
I just want you to feel like we haven't technically started the interview yet.
Yeah, we have.
But I just want to start with it's more of a comment than a question of, on the side of the Osborne Studio and Sound van, there's a picture of you with what I think is a really awesome goatee mustache thing.
No, maybe you look too old. I look too old. That was a different guy. That was a different time in my life. That was too lazy to shave, just whatever. And when you get to be my age, around 45 years old, that wonderful golden sheen starts to get a little lighter, if you know what I mean.
You say that as I'm sitting here because it's No Shave November. And
you got a little going on in there. A little pepper. A little salt. Mm-hmm. Yep. What are you, how old are you?
According to some of my recent coworkers, 25.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that.
Lying.
I'm 25.
Lying. I'm 15.
I'm 33. I'm 33 years old.
33 and already graying in the beard, huh? Mm-hmm. That's all that schoolwork you've been doing.
So, Blake, thanks for joining us.
Yes,
That's all
sir.
the time we have for this week.
Peace out.
No, I'm not going to do that. I feel so unprofessional wearing a jacket, but it's... what's today? It's the 28th?
Yeah, it's the 28th.
It's the 28th.
And this has been one of the coldest Novembers in Tennessee that I think we've had in 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, we're just, wow. I mean, and for those of you who follow the show, I'm a goat farmer, and I now raise alpacas. And something we really didn't think about being our first year farming is that, all our water lines are freezing. Ooh. So, when you have a water hose literally going 100 feet from your house to your animal barns, that sucker sort of stops working, and you find yourself having to carry really heavy jugs of water very long distances to feed many, many animals. So, back's hurting a little bit today.
What's the libertarian position on that?
Libertarian position on that? Well, if the apocalypse comes along and you're pretty much, the market's not working for you, and you see where I'm going with this. This is the way I see it. I can make fur. I can take the fur from the alpacas. I can make yarn, and with yarn you can make clothes, and with the goats you get cheese, you can get milk, you can get meat. Hey, I'm your future shopping center.
This has already taken a really weird direction that I didn't expect.
No. It's got nothing to do with that. We're going to do a mobile petting zoo. We're going to do some milk. We're going to sell fiber. We're going to do all those sort of things. It's kind of a thing that my wife and my kids and I can all do together as a family, where she doesn't have to leave. So that's kind of it's just a second career path, and just a change of pace. To slow down a little bit and enjoy the world.
Hold on a second. Let's start back at the beginning.
Okay.
And we're going to catch up to modern day because Blake Enterprises has taken off into a direction that if I had told you like 16 months ago that this is what you would be doing, would you have looked at me like?
What about the animals, about the farm? I would have thought you're nuts.
Okay.
That's way too much work for me. I got way too much on my plate.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So let's back up at the beginning. So Blake, you're not originally from Southern Middle Tennessee.
I am not originally from Southern Middle Tennessee. I was born in Memphis, and then I was taken to Miami, where I was raised in South Florida.
Oh, you were born in Memphis.
I was born in Memphis.
Really?
Yes.
And now, see, I didn't know that. So
Yes.
you are actually a native Tennessean, but you spent more time in South Florida.
I grew up down there, and then I got shipped back up here. So I guess that's how that worked out. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I grew up in a very different culture. I grew up with a different set of, a different set of factors coming in from all sides. Not just, with all of the different nations and all the different countries that are represented from South America and around the world, Miami is a very cultural city. It's very well blended, and it's an interesting place. If you've been anywhere in the United States that you don't feel like you're in the United States, that is truly a city to go to. It's an interesting place. It's very different.
Mm-hmm. So at what point, how far into life were you where you were pretty exclusively a Floridian before you moved on?
Oh man, I mean, I considered myself a Floridian all the way up to 1990, probably 1996, 97.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had an interesting background then, because in your community where you went to public school, I'm presuming.
Some. I didn't go to public school most of my life, but just for a short time.
Okay.
Only to realize how screwed up it leaves you.
Well, that's sort of where I'm going with this. But you were in an environment where a young white male of German ancestry, that was not the majority class.
No. I was the minority.
Yes.
I definitely was the minority, and I grew up in an interesting twist because don't get me wrong, there was your elitist crowd in Miami, and there still is. But in those days, that elitist crowd leaned more towards your Caucasian aptitude, if you know what I mean. I was raised by a single German mom. I had a wonderful father figure who raised me my entire life, along with my mother, and he instilled a lot of the values that I have today. My mother being German, her values are a little bit more socialistic than what the average American is. It's very different environment.
Now hold on. Is your mother of German ancestry, or is she German?
She is German.
German.
She is German. She was born in Regensburg. She left Germany when she married an American soldier.
Really?
And she was 18 years old. Left against my grandparents' will.
That's a
it was
made-for-TV
scandalous.
movie.
Yes, it was
kind
wonderful.
of
Yeah.
Wow.
And my real dad and my mom divorced about the time I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my mother got a job, and that's what brought us to Miami. And so I grew up in Miami from the time I was 4 years old, and I left Florida in 1999 to move back to Tennessee.
So at what point did young Blake get into, because you're a musician.
I'm a musician, yes.
So music is important to you.
Yes.
So give us a brief overview of early professional life for Blake Osborne. How did we go from, there's Blake the musician, you were a drummer, right?
No, many things.
Many things. Well, so
drummer, guitar player,
musician.
Mostly. Yeah.
So we have Blake the musician and Blake the audio visual engineer.
Right.
So tell the story there.
They naturally, one leads to the other. What happened is in high school, I went to a special school for learning disabled kids for many years. I have a minor tic disorder. I'm sure some people have seen that. And back in the late 80s, they really didn't understand a lot about ADD, ADHD, and all the different things that we all have classifications for now. And, you had medicines like Ritalin and all these different kinds of things that they would give us. But, kids are hyper, and I think that, I was among the more hyperactive when I was younger, which really definitely affected my ability to function in public school. So I went to a learning disabled academy called Vanguard down in South Florida that I went to for many years, for most of my elementary and almost all of my middle school up until 9th grade. And then in 9th grade, I'd choose to go to a regular high school. I was fortunate to be able to go to Westminster Christian School, where Alex Rodriguez, by the way, I went to school with Alex Rodriguez.
I like how you're just dropping that little...
I have to drop that in there for sports ball. But anyway, so... when I started high school, I met some great friends, and they all had a little bit of a musical interest, and it was a Christian school, so I started going to a lot of the church things that we were doing, and I learned to play praise and worship music on my worship team, and my best friend at the time was the drummer, and we just decided, hey, why don't we start a band? We're really into Christian music, and we started playing music, and some other friends joined up, and That band lasted 13 years to a record deal. In 1996, 97, we got a record deal up here in Nashville. And the record label kind of insisted that we move, to Tennessee because we were going to be doing a lot of touring and going all over the place. And so it's really hard to tour from South Florida because before you can get anywhere else, you got to get out of South Florida. And that's already 6 hours straight up out of the Panhandle. So, and out way down in there. And, so we moved up here and we established, me and the guys in the band all moved to Middle Tennessee, and we stayed here in about 2003, and we finally kind of dissolved at that point. But same group of guys, and made a couple of real great records and had a good run, so it's really cool. But that's where the audio-visual side comes in. From early on, this is really funny. I've never told you this. I had a teacher. In ninth grade, 10th grade, and she was talking about economics. And one of the lessons that she said was like, she used McDonald's as an example, where McDonald's owns the farms that raise the cows, owns the potato fields that raise the potatoes, talking about owning every aspect of your production. Okay, and this is an old economic theory. Well, so what we got in our minds back in the early days doing audio production, and we're doing sound for ourselves because you didn't rent sound. Nowadays the music industry is so incredibly different from what it used to be. Back in the day, you had sound people who did sound, you had bands that played, and the band wasn't the sound company. So here I go getting this great idea. Look, I'm going to buy a sound system because everywhere that we went to do a show, come on. They didn't even have PA. Nobody really knew what that was, If you were lucky enough to go play a place that actually had a PA, it was just a couple of speakers thrown together. It was nothing special. So saved up all my money, worked really hard, working for my dad. I bought a lot of audio gear and learned kind of how to use it, but really didn't get what I was doing. But we were the only band that really had a PA in Miami in those days. That was really going around and playing. This was 92 through like 94, 91 to 94. And it kind of helped us get a lot of good shows. I mean, having a PA system got us on a lot of better tickets. We would have a lot of the bigger names that would come down. It's like, hey, look, we got these guys, they want to open for you. They'll sound for free, that sort of thing. So you can see the business model develop. Anyway, so get out of high school, go into college, decide, hey, we really need to learn what we're doing. So we went to Full Sail, which is an audio production college down in Orlando. And
I know
learned how to do it. And from there on out, put a lot of that college money that you get from the government into audio recording equipment. Paying for that for a long time. To help build a small studio in a garage, and we knew all the other local bands. We worked with everyone, made a lot of great records in Central Florida. And then, that just sort of became the business model for the rest of my life, and it's grown from there. So.
And it's grown from there.
Yeah. So the band went away, and I got dropped in audio production.
You got dropped into audio production.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
You're in audio production.
Yes.
You're in Middle Tennessee.
Yes.
Nashville's right down the street.
Yes.
What's the next part of the professional life of Blake Osborne?
Well, the next part is just to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, just pedaling right along. I started working at Mars Music, which was a music store that used to exist back several years ago when I first moved here. And one day, I'm in this area where they sold DJ equipment. You know what I mean? And this gentleman's coming in and he's buying thousands of dollars worth of equipment and just watching this guy carry this stuff out the door. And I'm going, what is with this whole DJ thing? Who are these guys? And so these guys are coming in, they're buying this stuff and they're walking out like it's crazy. And so I'm thinking, they got to be making money on this stuff because obviously playing music isn't going to make you a dime.
Yeah.
And a lot of y'all can agree with that if you're musicians. But so I decide, I've got a lot of this PA stuff myself, sitting around. And, I asked one of these gentlemen coming in, so what are you doing with this stuff? Why are you buying so much? And he's like, oh, man, I'm a DJ. And that guy I particularly happened to ask was a cat that was doing Christian teen events.
Yeah.
And he was doing praise and worship dances. And I'd never heard of anything, but welcome to Tennessee. Anyhow, so I said, well, heck, I can do that. I got lights, I got a PA, so I put an ad in the paper and I got a job. hook up a couple CD players to a mixer, played some great music. They had some fun, and next thing you know, I'm doing it every freaking weekend. And so it just kind of became a career. And, I had always been involved in weddings, videotaping weddings for friends and stuff like that.
Sure.
So the two just kind of naturally grew together, and I sort of became an expert at wedding audio and wedding video. So that's kind of where I do now, other than recording bands in the studio, which we still do quite a bit of, and other sound production and things like that, and this show.
And the Gold Standard podcast.
Yes.
So
now we bored you all to death.
Well, let's take a little bit of a broad view though. But I think the important thing here is that you are always an entrepreneurial person. So that economics teacher, and isn't that interesting though that a lot of people.
She was an English teacher.
An English teacher
class.
who was talking. So she missed her calling, really. Actually, no, what it is she realized no one cares about economics. Nobody cares about economics. They don't even teach that in school now, so
no, they don't.
That you wouldn't have a job, Well, so that's interesting. But that stuck with you, that you were thinking to yourself, okay, I have to have control of my fate.
My dad was an entrepreneur.
Yes.
My not my real dad, but the man I said that raised me was an entrepreneur. He was a tax consultant, and he had many individual businesses. He ran a warehouse, he ran a grocery store, he had car lots, he had, a lot of rental properties. And I learned a lot about business from him, in that you want to try to do as much as you possibly can afford to do and create as many revenue streams as you can to help feed you. That way, if something is struggling in one place, you're going to be able to take up the slack with that in another. And, every dime that you make, you reinvest back into yourself. Instead of blowing it on luxuries and things you want to do, you got to build and build and build, and every little thing builds to the next. And as you get to, as you get along in life, you're able to amass what you need to do what you do. And, especially in my line of work, where, every piece of equipment is god-awful expensive. And just the microphone you're speaking into right there, and that's a week's work, and it's one thing at a time, and over time you build it up, and that's how you do it.
Well, that's an interesting background, because the overwhelming majority of people are not entrepreneurs. They will have never owned a business.
No.
So, but you got a really heavy dose of that from pretty much from the get-go.
And that's where you have to get it. You see, the problem with becoming an entrepreneur is that entrepreneurs, people don't believe they can. And to me, that's always been the biggest issue. It's like, what do you mean you can't? What can you do? I know guys who, they got a lawnmower and they got 5 neighbors. You can make $100 right there. All you got to do is knock on doors and, hey man, you need me to mow your lawn, $20? Who would say no to a 14-year-old kid with a lawnmower, and they got a lawn the size of, the size of a basketball court? Anybody can do that. And what I think it takes is number one, believing in yourself that you actually can do it. Okay, and understand that people are willing to pay money, for you to do a service for them, and everybody's got a lawnmower. And that's one of the best examples, is the lawnmower business thing. Here's a funny story. I was in a gas station, and I noticed this pickup truck sitting in the gas station. And it's got the picture of a dog on the side of it, okay? A dog. And the dog's dressed up like a butler, and he's got like a shovel in one hand, and it says Doggy Butler, and there's a phone number. Like, what's a Doggy Butler? And I walk in, and there's this gentleman standing at the counter, and he's got a big smile on his face, a young man, real nice guy. And I said, excuse me, is that your truck out there? He goes, oh yeah, that's my truck. And I'm like, what exactly do you do? No, having it in my mind what I thought he did. And he says, I scoop poop. I was like, you scoop poop? He's like, yeah, I scoop poop for a living. And he goes in to explain to me that he got an idea for a business where he goes to people's houses and he charges them a small fee to remove dog excrement from the yards, which is a good thing. It's sanitary. It's who wants to step in dog poo? Who wants their kids to trip in dog poo, right? This guy was making $2,000 a month scooping dog poop.
In what year was this that he was making $2,000?
About 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Making a couple
So
grand
I want
a
you
month.
guys to think about that when it comes to entrepreneurship. So many people spend their entire lives working for somebody else every single day, in and out. The boss doesn't even show up. You don't even see that guy. It's because he's on a beach in Panama. Okay, why is he there? Because you're doing his work for him.
You know what our audience has learned so far from this little vlog series of the Gold Standard crew is that the host is by far the most pessimistic person in the group.
We got to balance you out some, man. Your pessimism will sink into a pit, man.
Because me and Rob don't agree on everything, but Rob comes on and he's positive and he's talking about engaging and keeping the conversation alive.
Yeah.
And then Blake comes on here and he's talking about, being a master of your domain.
Yeah.
And working hard and being able to, move the needle.
Yeah.
And I'm the one saying, no, it's all hope is lost.
No, all hope is not lost. You know what it is? Because when you start out in the very beginning, when you believe in yourself, you say, I'm going to make something. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to own my own life. I'm going to take control. I'm going to take the risks. I'm going to do things. The beginning sucks. You're broke. You're frat freaking broke, and you're convinced nothing's going to work. But if you follow it, if you stick to your guns, you save your money, and you little by little, you build into your dream will happen. And that's the great thing about this country. With all of the issues that we're always throwing around back and forth, racism and, the borders and all this political mumbo jumbo and these political celebrities that completely ruin everything, distract away from what's really should be important, the principles, the policies. It's easy to get disheartened. It's easy to lose hope. It's easy to think, oh man, the best I'm ever going to be is a gas station worker, or the best I'm ever going to be. Not that there's anything wrong with being a gas station worker, because people usually consider that being the end of the road thing. It's not. It's a beginning of the road thing.
The best I'm going to be is a podcast host.
The best you're going to be is a podcast host with 200 listeners, and then 1,200 listeners, and then 40,000, and then 500,000. You just got to stick with it. If you don't stick with things, they're not going to succeed. That's just the truth.
Now let's back up here a second.
Yeah.
So we've got a bird's eye view of Blake Osborne, the entrepreneur, the audiovisual engineer, which everyone knows that anyway because they watch the Gold Standard podcast.
Audio engineering is a dead end job. Don't go there. Trust me. I've already learned that.
See, there's that hopeless cynicism that I was looking for. There it is. But hold on. So what would you describe as sort of your political or philosophical background from early childhood up until, say, maybe 5 or 10 years ago? We're not going to talk about immediate current events.
Dude,
in the last couple of decades.
Conservative is all get out. And I mean Republican red big time. I mean, that's just, it's obvious. Just look at me. I'm the kind of guy that I walk into a room and I don't say anything and everybody goes, there's a Republican. And immediately hated for that. And what was really funny about me growing up is I really didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. I mean, it didn't make sense to me. When I was a kid, I was more into Legos and Transformers and G.I. Joe. That's what I was into, But so many people were so politically charged in South Florida because of Cuba and because of all the things that a lot of Latinos and a lot of Latin America goes through. It's a very socially aggressive area. And so being a white kid in a sea of Latinos is an interesting place to be. And I think that a lot of people who've ever experienced what I would consider racism, you'll know where I'm coming from. You can say, oh, you can't possibly know what that feels like because you're white, but that's not true. You do get segregated, especially within groups of people that are not your, not the same, shade of color of you.
Yeah.
Well, I've kind of lost my train of thought. Help me out.
So you're a quote unquote traditional conservative Republican.
Right.
So was that your family influence? Was your family?
That was my dad.
Okay.
That was my dad.
Okay.
My mom is more of a socialist.
But she's
because
European.
She's German, so it's to be expected. So she's a European social thinker.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a clash there. But being people see me coming in a crowd, and in South Florida where I was initially going with that whole thing is it's a very socialist leaning, progressive leaning area.
Yeah.
So because everyone's very progressive, when you're not a progressive, you stick out like a sore thumb. You don't even have to open your mouth and they automatically know just by looking at you. So I was often shunned away from friends or from different groups of people, and we get into a lot of heated arguments and really wouldn't understand why somebody just didn't like me because I didn't have a definition for what my beliefs were. And so I feel that more in my life growing up, the problems I had were not so much racial as they were social views. And I think that social views are too inflated, are overbearing, and are just too judgmental these days. I mean, we're too busy looking at what somebody believes than actually caring about who they are. And that's the biggest problem today.
Now, fast forward, young adult Blake, you're in Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is pretty textbook Republican conservative state.
It's a red state,
it's what it is. who are the kind of influences that you're keeping up with that you're thinking, well, these are the people that I subscribe to at that time? Like, who are you listening to that you're saying, well, hey, I agree with this guy?
I'm going to tell you, before I met you, I was a hardcore Republican guy. A lot of the things that I've learned from you are kind of changing the way I look at the world, and it's a confusing place to be. A lot of the reasons why I don't chime in and talk during the show sometimes is because I'm still trying to understand a lot of the things that you teach. And I think a lot of the viewers out there, some of them who are hardcore libertarians and understand everything. Then there's guys like me who were not educated libertarians, who I'm learning the process. I call myself a recovering conservative, and I'm not even sure that I'm 100% conservative, given that there's so many things that I see one way and so many things I see on the other. So I just consider myself an individualist and someone who likes looking at the world from the top of the fence.
Well, here's the tough thing, the way I see it, as someone who tries to reach audiences and talk to people, is that when someone tells you, because I don't know, if I say I've met you for first time, I don't know you, and I just say, well, where are you at? Tell me where you're coming from. And you say, I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
Well, I hear that that's what you're saying, but I don't know if that's true, because a lot of people who say they're conservatives are, in my opinion, not conservatives.
Exactly.
A lot of people who would say that they're liberals, that I would say that from the classical sense of the word liberal, you're absolutely not a liberal. And you've heard me on this show call out all sorts of people that they would self-identify as libertarians, and I'd say, you're not a libertarian. You want to be different, but you don't really know what that means, so I wouldn't say that you are.
It comes to principles.
Yeah, exactly.
It comes to principles, and I can tell you what those principles are with me.
What's that?
Okay. I used to be a warmonger. I'm no longer a warmonger.
Okay.
And I'm serious about that. I mean, I watched this documentary on Vietnam a couple weeks ago that was on the History Channel and blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I mean, it crushed me to see what American soldiers went through for a pointless cause. And I used to be like, I used to resent people who were against, the soldiers coming back. And I will say this, I am not against the individual soldier. I'm not against the person that serves in the military. But I understand that when they serve the military, they are making a choice to serve the state and the state's interests, which is a conflict for me. Because on the one hand, if I was to go into the military, I would do it for the sense that I'm fighting for my family. I'm fighting for my kids. I'm fighting for my friends. But I'm not necessarily fighting for Cheney's money.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with that? And so I feel like ever since World War II, the majority of wars that we have fought have been about money, have been about political motives that are not necessarily something that I represent. So my principles on that have changed a lot. I don't really feel like going to war has a point anymore. I think that it's being abused badly by our government in bad ways. Now, my other principle. Police. I used to be a cop lover. Okay, cop lover. I'm not a cop hater, and I'll never say I am. Okay?
As our friend Mance Raider would say, he calls them cop suckers.
Okay, I'm not that. But once again, it's the same stance. I do believe that we need to have law and order, of course, and I do believe there needs to be some degree of enforcement there. But at the same time, I believe that police officers have to really choose their better judgment. And for the most part, most of them do. But there's a lot of them that don't, which is giving the blue a bad name. So it's difficult. And being a conservative who's learning about libertarianism and learning to incorporate and plugging those thoughts in, there's a lot of conflict there, and it's the conflict that's difficult to resolve. So it messes with your principles. So that's another one. And liberty. Liberty is absolute to me. I don't believe that anybody has a right to any of your property. And, and that lines up with conservatism. So it's,
Well, that's the difficult thing, though, because I'm not that I'm saying that you're wrong on any one thing. It's that, like, you started with the war issue. And being anti-war, in my opinion, is probably the single most, like if you had to say what's the most important thing, it's rejecting violence.
Exactly.
And war, that is a state function.
Yeah,
war
absolutely.
has happened because states go to war with one another.
Yeah.
Like groups of people don't just up and decide, let's off 40% of each other. They don't do that.
They don't.
States do that.
Yeah.
And so you have to reject violence. You just have to.
Yeah.
I can't have a conversation with you if you don't reject violence.
Right.
That's just.
And who
that's
is
it.
the state? Who is the state? Are we the people the state, or is the state? And has that separation gotten too far out of hand, or is it so ingrained that you're not even sure whose side you're on anymore?
Yeah. And so the tough thing then, I guess, for the recovering conservative is that so when someone like an Alan Mosley comes along and says, fuck the soldiers, and you're like, well, that's opposite of what I think I believe.
Right.
And then when Alan Mosley says there's no such thing as a good cop, and you're like, well, that's the opposite of what I believe. I know because I know a lot of people out there who are not ready for that. Hear that and they think there's no room for a conversation with this nut job because that's the opposite of what I think. But I think what's important for people on every side of a debate to do is to evaluate, well, where does that statement come from? Like, how can someone say, fuck the soldiers? Like I want to understand, even whether I agree with it or disagree with it, I want to understand where that statement comes from. And so for me, or for the where that comes from is that, well, when you if you believe that war is the single worst thing, and you believe that the military is the enforcement wing of the state. When you see those types of comments of, the Iraq war vet says, it says, well, I fought for your rights, so you ought to do X, Y, and Z. I said, no, you didn't.
No.
There is no soldier alive who ever fought for my freedom.
No.
That's a tough pill to swallow, though, isn't it? It's a tough pill for you alone, out of this conversation, to go home and look in the mirror and say to yourself, has a single soldier alive today fought for my freedoms? If the answer is no, and you're trying to absorb that, that's tough.
It is.
It is.
It is. It is tough.
Yeah, and it's the same logic with the no such thing as a good cop. If you know for a fact that there are unjust laws, and you know for a fact that the police are, again, the enforcement wing of the state, and the police don't decide the laws, but they do decide to be police, though.
Yeah.
And if you know that being a policeman means you must enforce laws that you know are unjust, you are not a good cop. And so that's why it's more of a trick question, right?
Yeah.
It's that there's no such thing as a good cop, because to be a cop, you have to play by their rules, and the rules are wrong. Therefore, you can't possibly be a good one. You can't possibly be.
Right, because if as a cop you go against the rules that you're supposed to enforce, then you're going to be fired.
Yes, exactly.
It's like you have to do what they say to do because you signed up for that.
Yeah, it's a fairy tale, right?
So think about this. Put yourself in a scenario where you're a cop and you're forced, and the law says that you have to, as a police officer, make a choice to do something to a citizen, to arrest a citizen or put a citizen in incarceration. Even though you completely agree with what the citizen is doing, you feel like the law is wrong there. Where does that put you as an officer? Now, that is a conflict that officers have to deal with.
Well, here's the thing, is that our political opponents, they're the type of people that would say that, well, we have to have a system of laws and we have to respect authority. That's fucking bullshit. No, first of all, I don't have to respect no one or nothing. You don't tell me what I do and don't have to do. And you don't get to decide what is and isn't civil society and who is and isn't excluded.
Right.
Society as a whole is a large function. You don't get to determine that. No person does. No singular entity gets to decide that.
No one does.
The state, who is responsible for all the horrors of the world, sure as shit doesn't get to decide that.
Right.
And so in your analogy, so then the police officer who's saying that, well, I don't believe that this is serving justice, but this is my job. The only moral and ethical thing for him to do is to let that person go, but you know that is forfeiting the standards of your position.
Exactly, which is a catch-22.
You must abandon your position.
Right, that's the only option that you have.
That's the only moral and ethical. And again, when you break it down logically piece by piece, and this is why I respect you a lot, and I believe you're a really intelligent person, because when you break that down piece by piece, I can just see the light bulb go off in your head, and you're like, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
But
it should make sense to everybody else.
But as someone who came from a conservative background, you can understand that your brothers and sisters in arms, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It is, because you feel like you're abandoning them. You feel like you're letting them down when you've always been on their side. You know, but there's also the fear factor side of that too, because it's like the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want the police to be out to get me because I'm against what they stand for. So that's the same with soldiers, you know, and so that's the conflict. That's the catch-22. If you're a conservative in those two areas, trying to reconcile with libertarianism, and I think that, you know, you just have to accept the fact that really, once again, you abandon the post. And that's the only thing that makes any sense, because who ultimately are you serving? You know, are you serving the citizens, or are you serving the government? You know, and if the government says kill the citizens, which are you gonna choose? Are you gonna choose to shoot everybody, or are you gonna choose to let the government kill you as a citizen? So, and I know that sounds ridiculously extreme, but many nations have been there.
Well, let's fast forward then to more modern day Blake. Modern day Blake.
Modern day Blake.
Yeah. So, what would you say, looking back? So we're well into our second year of doing the show here.
Yeah.
What would you say is a moment that you can, because this is totally unrehearsed.
Okay. Yeah, it always is.
Completely off the. Don't tell anyone. What's a moment that you can look back on the last 40 some odd episodes of the Gold Standards where you would say that's a moment where I was like, wow, that I'm not sure I can go back from, like, I can't go back now. I've crossed the Rubicon.
I've crossed the Rubicon and I can't go back.
What's a moment for you personally where you're like, that's it, I can't roll out the tired old arguments anymore?
You know, we cover so many topics. Every single show has a moment. You know, and like I said, so much hits me at such frequency doing this that it's tough for me to reconcile all the things that go on in my head, you know. And I mean, really, it's just the journey that we have every single week as we learn more and more from all of our wonderful guests and from the people that we talk to. And each one of them contributes a bit of knowledge, a bit of intelligence that slowly is stitching itself together to become a solid belief system. You know, I don't believe that you ever get to a point in your life where you say, I am where I need to be in your system of beliefs. I think that you are always growing, and that you're always learning, and that you're always changing, and you're always modifying. And I think that you need to do that to stay healthy, and don't ever let your belief system stagnate. So to answer your question, I don't really have a moment. I have a conglomeration of many things that I'm absorbing like a sponge, and I'm really trying to plug into myself so I can be a better person.
I'm gonna pick on you. I'm gonna ask you hard questions.
Okay.
Who's been your favorite guest?
My favorite guest. I'm bad with names.
Uh-oh.
But one of my favorite guests was the man with the bow tie.
Jeffrey Tucker.
Jeffrey Tucker.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk to him about Bitcoin.
Yes, we
We're going to talk to this guy about
going
Bitcoin.
to, yes.
So he starts going on and on and on about drinking age.
Sure.
And how there should be no drinking age.
Yeah.
You know, and the German in me is like, duh.
Well, yeah.
You know, I mean, how many drunk driving accidents do you see in Germany? Not very many, unless it's Americans involved. And they're always the Americans. They're always the ones dying. You know, and why are Germans being raised with a bottle of beer? Well, because alcoholism is about binging. It's about sucking it down until you get drunk. It's not about appreciating a beverage. Okay? I personally don't drink. Because in my life, my real father's, you know, death was the result of alcoholism, you know, and that taught me to stay away from this stuff. But, you know, when I see people drink, well, I went to high school, okay? I'm in a Christian high school.
Yeah.
You know, these kids are 14, 15, 16 years old, and all they want to do is get their hands on alcohol.
Yeah.
That's all they want to do.
Yeah.
So when Jeffrey Tucker was talking about just legalize alcohol and let everybody drink it, I know that sounds insane to some people. Oh, well, kids are not responsible enough to that. Well, believe it or not, when it's something you've always had, you don't abuse it.
Well, what Jeffrey Tucker was saying is that you're right. There's a
Yep.
lot of people who are irresponsible, and a lot of unsafe things can happen. So let's bring it out in the light.
Let's
do
get it done.
Let's do it in safe places
Yeah.
with other responsible folks,
Exactly.
so they can socially learn how to handle themselves.
Right, which is what has been the norm in
Yeah.
Europe from the word go.
Wow.
You know, and it's and that's one of the things that really struck me when he started talking. That's kind of one of the first things I was really smacked in the face by. I was like, whoa.
Sure.
And the other guy I love is the I really have a problem with names. It's always been an issue with me. I can't remember names. It's my deficit.
So for everybody at home, I gave Blake like no heads up on any of this.
So the guy that's been on the foreign things that was talking about Iraq and
Scott Horton.
Afghanistan, Scott Horton. So Scott Horton,
Great anti-war advocate, Scott Horton.
unreal. He's really one of the reasons why I changed my stance on war. And he is a brilliant, incredible, insanely observant individual who, yes, could probably talk forever. And I would listen to him forever because he's a genius. And I mean, what he knows and what he's learned in his experience is just y'all need to listen to this guy. I mean, I think we should have him back as many times as he'll be willing to. You know, and I mean, it's just every single one of our guests has really contributed to the knowledge base that I'm beginning to create, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
It's been really interesting. I have to say, it's been really interesting, kind of watching you from a distance. Just you're observing, you're producing the show, you're switching the camera, you're observing the talk, and I can kind of see you doing this sort of nodding along.
Yeah,
because you've had the interesting position of being someone who kind of pretty much came in day one. I don't know anything about anything of what you're talking about.
I still don't.
Tell me what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we brought in like a celebrity who's list of some of the greatest authors, historians, economists, foreign policy experts. And so it's not like you were just getting it from Joe Bob down the street. We've had, I mean, you mentioned Jeffrey Tucker, Scott Horton, Jeff Dice, Bob Murphy, Tom Woods. I mean, I'm going to forget a ton of people.
There's
Connor
all these
Boyack.
genius people, these amazing people, and I'm like, who are you again?
Yeah. And so you're not even getting
I'm the layest of the lay people, man. I really am. I am the layman. I'm just walking into this, and I'm like, pow, what is going on here?
All right, we got two more, and then we'll wrap up.
Two more, good.
The best one. So what would you say is a really big issue on your mind for today, current event?
Social justice.
Social justice.
And it's a fallacy.
So you're a big social justice warrior, right?
No.
No. What? No.
I think that people are blowing it out of proportion. You know, history. Read your history books. Look back in the past. Humanity will always have a fail. There's no such thing as fairness. And anybody who sits there and tells me that we can make government fair, you're crazy. And if you disagree with that, get it in the history books. Socialism doesn't work. It just doesn't. It can't. Because ultimately there will be a government in power who chooses what to distribute to the people. If you think for 1 second that government is benevolent and has your best interest in mind or mine, you're nuts.
Well, I think one of like the bumper sticker slogans is that if you believe in socialism because you fear the moral failings of mankind, but you don't understand that the state is made up of people from mankind.
Exactly.
Then you don't get why. You just don't get why.
Who are these benevolent leaders
Yeah.
that are going to decide that they need to distribute wealth amongst all of the people? Who are these benevolent leaders that are going to come and save you? Who? Is there one in Washington right now? Because I haven't seen one. Have you seen one?
No.
All I see is celebrity assholes. Okay, and so when you're out there demonstrating in the streets, being all mean to everybody, throwing signs, ripping your hair off, and wearing sageblood, just understand something. You're wrong. I'm sorry. Okay? Think about it. Your freedom is not in the hands of other people. You're never going to find a leader who is going to save you. You save yourself. You do it. I did it. I can do it. I'm raising goats. Goats make stuff. You can do that. You can mow a lawn. Okay? You don't need the government to give you anything because they're always going to want your life in return. And understand that. You're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. You just absolutely are. You think that they've got your best interest in mind. No, they have their best. Here's one of the things. Distribution of wealth. Classic example. Okay, government has all the wealth. Okay, you believe the government is going to give a fair share of wealth to everybody. How do you know how much wealth the government has?
What's fair?
What's fair? What's fair? Mm-hmm. We all get $40,000 a year from the government. You're not allowed to make a dime more. Okay. A TV's $50,000.
Well, the trick question is it's never even because it's never even about who has the wealth. It's never even about what's fair, really. It's about who gets to decide who makes those decisions, and what happens when the God King that you believe in, that's making the decisions today, abdicates the throne, and someone who doesn't like you takes up the mantle.
Then you get a king.
What will you do now that all that power has been centralized?
Yeah. Yep. And when you disagree with the emperor, you get beheaded. So that's where we're headed if we don't think straight.
That's where we're headed.
That's where we're headed or going to be beheaded. And the history repeating itself. If you don't go back and learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. And this is something we've told you 1,000 times, but you're too lazy. You want to have fun. You want to go out, drink coffee, yada, da, 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 da. You don't want to learn. So when you make your choices and you vote, you're voting wrong. You're voting for the bad guys. Stop it.
I feel like you're angry.
Oh, that makes me angry.
I feel like this is my fault somehow.
No, it's not your fault. I've always been that way.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
And it comes down to the end. That's what it always comes down to for me is that, I want the poor to be fed. I want immigrants who deserve to be in the United States to come here and have a chance.
Be careful with that. That word deserve. What's deserve? Who deserves what?
When in their countries they have been discriminated against, murdered, killed, their families have been destroyed because of evil governments. And now I know that sounds progressive, and that sounds like the German in me.
No, that's not progressive at all. All those things happened to those people because our government destroyed their governments.
I know that now, but like this caravan coming in here, that's an invasion. But when it comes to immigration, there's a fine line of who deserves it and who doesn't, or who should be let in and who shouldn't. I think that racism should not be a factor in that at all. But what can these people contribute? I think that we should have that there should be at least a decent, logical system in place for people to find their way into the United States. A system that makes sense. You just walk in.
The problem is
you have to have a government to do that, so that makes you a statist. I know. I can't wrap my head around that.
Well, that's what I was going to get at, though. Is that the problem is that we know government's terrible at everything, and they're horrible, and they're murderous, and they're pillagers, and they're thieves, and they're rapists, and they're everything.
Sure.
So you can't because when you say we have to have a system, well, having a system means having unless you truly live in that amazing voluntarist society where
and that's what I'm saying.
But the thing is, this is why, in my opinion, the correct libertarians are not, as they call, bordertarians, and people should be allowed to come and go as they please. And the main reason is that, so first of all, if your argument against that is there's some bad apples, our friend, actually, you know what? It's a friend of ours, but I'm not going to say his name just because I don't want to put words in his mouth that he may not be comfortable with saying on air. I'm sure he would be, but I'm just not going to say his name.
Okay.
But a friend and a guest of this show made such an awesome statement in regards to state violence and the whole immigration thing just a couple of nights ago. He said, I'm always amazed by all these conservatives who are afraid about brown people taking their liberties, as if their lily white neighbor next door gives a damn about you.
Okay, and see that's where I'm saying I'm not a xenophobe, and that's xenophobia. Okay, I am not a xenophobic person. I grew up in a place where everyone was mismatched. And that actually made Miami wonderful. Okay, and that gives me an understanding of race and there's cultural differences, and I absolutely love culture. Okay, and I have no problem with culture. And what I have a problem with is, is people being so inclusive and exclusive that they're unwilling to understand the values and the cultures of others. Okay, and that breaks into racism and all kinds of its different stuff. You know, I don't know. From being a conservative to being in this weird place somewhere in between, it's not an easy walk, man. And there's always the principles that I hold dear, that I hold solid. Some of them have been bumped out of line, you know, and I'm trying to reconcile with new ideas. And that's what's so great about what we're doing here, is that hopefully we're opening the eyes to people so that you all understand that, you know, America's not the perfect country that we think it is. You know, I always believed that America was benevolent and that what we are is the best example to the world of the greatest country. Okay, but we're not all the way there. We have a lot of issues to resolve. We have a lot of logical problems. We have caused almost all of the problems in the world by trying to solve the problems.
I'm sorry. I'm going to pick on you again.
Good.
You keep on using that word "we." We didn't do jack.
No, I know. I'm just using the United States.
There is no "we."
See, and that's the conservative side of me.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not
I know
kidding.
because
it's hard to shake it.
I know it's an identity thing, and I know, and don't get me wrong. I know that for a conversation, I know what you mean. I know you mean that, you know, the government has done X, Y, and Z. We've been involved in these world affairs, and I know that's what you mean. But I just like to be clear to people that. So I have no responsibility for any of that. Right. I didn't vote for any of these clowns. I never consented to any of the things they're doing. I never directed any of the bombings in the Middle East. I never told the CIA to overthrow any government. I didn't do any of that.
But you're an American. And as the rest of the world sees you, those leaders in power must have been put there by you.
Exactly. Well, I know that there's people around the world that, I mean, that's how they justify the terrible things they do. Yeah. And that's why I had made the comment just the other day that created such a storm on social media that I'll give you another one. Not the one where I said a bad word.
You've already said plenty.
Yeah, right. I had made a comment. It was back during the anniversary of Hiroshima and the dropping the atomic bombs in World War II. And again, I'm not even going to say in my opinion. It just is. If you don't agree with me, go kill yourself. If you're a libertarian, you don't condone the dropping of weapons of mass destruction on civilians. You don't. Full stop. Because remember, you reject state violence.
Exactly.
You must be there.
Yeah.
And so I consider it's historically obtuse to say that, well, a land invasion would have been worse and we were trying to, that's all bullshit. No. There was tons of generals and people in Truman's cabinet who were saying that we didn't have to I'm not even going there. I'm not even going into all that. What I'm saying is that those bombs were dropped as to prove a point, to show an example of power. And they were dropped on targets where hundreds of thousands of innocent people were incinerated.
That's right.
This is wrong.
Very wrong.
If you can't on just a basic level understand this is state violence and it is wrong, there's no hope for you as a human being.
And the hardest thing to wrap your head around about that is you as an American and the rest of the way the world, the way the rest of the world sees you, as you are the person that said yes, do that.
So anyway, the reason I brought that up is that if you can't understand the difference between, because some people will say, well, Japan had it coming, because this is where I'm getting at with the whole we thing. If you can't understand the difference between Japan and innocent Japanese people, then you're a retard.
Yeah.
Because there's no we.
Yeah.
The Japanese people who got, vaporized.
Yeah.
They weren't the Empire of Japan.
That's right. They weren't the empire.
And some of them probably supported it. Some of them maybe have been full-blooded, let's go conquer the world. But I promise you some of them were not. And I guarantee you exactly none of them had any real say in the affairs of their government.
Because their government was run by an emperor.
In the same way that we don't have any real say in the state actions of the United States. And so abandon the we. Abandon this nationalistic identity. Understand the value of the individual. Understand that while we may not, and I don't mean to sound so pessimistic, I don't mean to say that, well, it's a shame that we have no power. What I mean to say is disassociate yourself from that violence.
Right.
Disassociate yourself from that cruelty and from that power.
Which is perhaps the next step.
You don't want to be the part of the we.
I don't want to be part of the we.
So,
and that's my learning process.
So with that said, we're going to get you out of here on this one.
Okay.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
You know I know the answer to that.
What's the answer?
It's a sandwich. And anybody who doesn't think it's a sandwich, well, you can look it up in the dictionary. Even the dictionary says it's a sandwich. Wikipedia says it's a sandwich. Now, I will argue with that.
I feel like it's fair at this point to say that if you don't think it's a sandwich, you should get in the boxcar.
What does that mean? Get in the boxcar.
Don't worry about it, Blake.
Okay.
Don't even worry about it. Guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been part 2 of a 3-part series of getting to know the Gold Standard crew. We started with Rob Nellinger, our awesome webmaster. And this was sprung on him too, by the way. For people who, if you've already listened to that and you're thinking, who was that? That was sprung on him. Yeah. And this is part 2 with the producer of the Gold Standard. All the compliments we get, I just want to say really quick.
Okay.
All the compliments, we don't get any compliments of the show about the host. We don't do that. We get exactly 0 compliments about anything. All the compliments are, wow, that show looks and sounds awesome. Like where are they doing this show? It's so professional. Like most of the shows I listen to, it's just some redneck yelling in his basement. And this show is so good. What is that show? That is thanks to our producer, the owner of Osborne Studio and Sound, Blake Osborne. Blake, thank you so much.
Hey, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's what you do.
That's what I do.
Guys, you can follow us on social media, which is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. You can go on there. And Blake's there too. So you can actually say, hey, this one's for Blake. When are y'all getting a new host? Blake will answer. He's there. He's a part. He's on the team. So you can talk to Rob. You can talk to Blake. Yeah. No one talks to me, so it's fine. You can get me on Twitter, which is at Alan M. Mosley. But you really don't have to do any of that. You just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
Blake, do you have anything else about this episode about Blake?
No. I'm good.
You're all good?
Just like I always end it. I'm good.
I feel like there was a part there where you were like, I better get all of this out because he'll never talk to me again.
No, there wasn't.
There's like for the next 30 episodes, Alan's not even going to look at me. And I want to say this too really quick. This is going on too long. I forget to introduce you on at least 9 out of 10 episodes.
I'm okay with that though. I'm just that guy that sits next to you pushing buttons with the weird headphones on his head.
But you do the intro. You say, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another whatever edition of the Gold Standard," and then we just move on.
Yeah,
and everyone's like, "Who was that guy?"
Who's that guy? You know,
that's not Alan's voice. Who was that?
I don't know.
So I'll have to do a better job of saying, "Thank you so much, Blake. Welcome to the Gold Standard." I never do that. It's my failing as a host, but to be fair, I never said this was going to be any good.
It's good though.
It is good though.
It's good.
It's good because of the production, and it's good because of the quality guests that come on the show.
And it's good because the host is not that bad.
Not if I'm able to publish a book by the end of next year, which is something I haven't talked about, but we'll talk about that some other time. I want to put on the cover, "Not so bad -- Blake Osborne."
Awesome.
Yeah, not so bad.
Don't get too excited.
Maybe put the "so" in italics so that it reads "not so bad."
So bad.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.